Passed. She spoke her name into his ear as the bar pulsed rhythmically around them. She was Jasmine, she told him, and she was a graduate student. "What do you study?" he asked. The liquor he drank warmed him up from the inside, and being near her, smelling her perfume and the lush scent of her hair, made him sweat. She leaned her head back on the seat next to him and watched him through heavy, half-lidded eyes. Archaeology. Jasmine licked her lips and moved closer to him. The warmth of her body against his made him want to pounce on her, which was not his way. Her long, silky black hair brushed the sensitive skin of his hand. It was extremely erotic to feel her silky hair touch his skin, and he tried to remain calm as she explained her specialty. "My dissertation topic is Heinrich Schliemann's excavations at Troy." "Troy? You mean Helen of Troy?" She smiled. Her full lips were soft and pink, and the only thing stopping him from leaning in and kissing them was that he didn't want to scare her. He wanted her desperately, despite Scarlet and the ring that burned in his back pocket. "Exactly that one. I don't know much about it." The music seemed to be getting louder, so he moved closer to her. Her eyes shone like jasper under a very bright light. Troy was a lost city. Schliemann searched for it, and many believe that he found the right place. Many also believe that he completely destroyed the real city. Archaeologists are still excavating the site. While she spoke, he looked at her mouth. He wondered if it was too early to ask her if she wanted to come back to his hotel room with him. She seemed interested in him, but he couldn't tell how much. She might have been one of those women who sticks with men so they don't have to buy anything all night, but she didn't give that impression. His friend, Otto, was somewhere with his friend Jasmine. He didn't remember her name before Otto started making out with her and pulling her onto the dark and crowded dance floor. "What is your name?" "Vincent." He winced when he realized he hadn't thought to lie. Jasmine picked up the straw from her drink and licked it, her eyes never leaving his. "What are you doing, Vincent?" "I work for a local supermarket distributor." She smiled and put her hand behind the back of his chair. Her blush dress rode up her smooth legs. He tried not to look too obvious, but her knowing expression told him he had failed. "I thought you were going to tell me you were a banker or something. You look like a banker." He placed his hand on her bare knee. Her eyes dropped to where he touched her, and then returned to his face. "Should I take this as a compliment?" Jasmine placed her hand on his thigh. He closed his eyes and realized that he was quickly approaching the point of no return. If he continues, there will be no turning back. He thought of Scarlet at home with her list of things he did wrong and shook his head. Marriage clearly did not suit him. 4 months into the marriage, and he was about to give up. Frankly, he acted like an idiot. He thought marriage wouldn't change anything, but that wasn't the case. Scarlet was a wonderful woman, but he felt caged, small, trapped. Every day was predictable and boring. His decision was made, and he opened his eyes. "You want to get out of here, Jasmine?" The present. He's definitely retiring soon. How many personal days did he have in January alone? Otto threw me a tennis ball. "You'll be CEO in 6 months. I swear to God." "I hope you're right. I've been breaking my back for the last year to make sure that George only sees me for this position. I'll be furious if he even considers anyone else." George will turn 75 next month. He was one of the most driven, focused, and successful people Vincent had ever met. He was solely responsible for the success of H&H supermarkets in the Northeast. Vincent had a great relationship with George. George was his mentor when he started. He often hinted that Vincent would be his successor, but Vincent was not blind to the fact that George had to interview other people. He's pretty sure he'll get the position, but almost wasn't enough for Vincent. "No one else can take that away from you. Just keep doing what you've been doing." Otto picked up a photo of Vincent's family from the edge of his desk. "Your family even likes him. That's a good sign. He doesn't like that Lena and I aren't married. You know how much he loves that model family story." "Really, besides, he should sit in a room with my children for 5 minutes. Their language is incredible." Otto laughed briefly. "I wonder who they got it from, Vin." "Every word out of Tara's mouth is bitch. Every word out of Finn's mouth is holy shit. Scarlett, of course, blames me. Definitely your fault. Scarlett is an angel. Otto handed him the picture frame and walked to the door. Better go see George and sweeten him up a little before the end of the day. Yeah, Vincent said before Otto closed the door. Vincent studied the photo of his family until his lips curved into a smile. His 13-year-old daughter, Tara, looked exactly like her mother. She was beautiful and smart, even if she was always sarcastic. Her little brother, a 10-year-old comedian named Finn, smiled for the camera. Scarlett stood next to the children, a calm smile spreading across her face. His family was more than he could have hoped for, and sometimes he wondered if he deserved them. He knew that he could be quite nasty, but Scarlett put up with him, which was not so easy. She combined work and caring for children with such skill that he constantly admired her. So, his life finally began to take shape. The money was put into the children's accounts. He worked hard to become the next CEO, and Scarlett studied to become a trainee nurse. He must have known that another disaster was on the way. He knocked on the door and walked in when he heard George telling him to come inside. "Vincent, how are you? Haven't seen you all week." "I was sorting out a crisis at the Albany location. Someone forgot to renew their business license on time, but I did clear up a few issues." George smiled approvingly, looking at Vincent appraisingly. "Good. You're always good at fixing problems." He motioned for Vincent to sit opposite his desk, and Vincent accepted the invitation. He coughed and shook his head. "I can't get rid of this cold. My wife didn't even want me to come today, but we have an interview scheduled." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "We have? I didn't know about it." George picked up the phone and dialed his secretary. She said that the young woman was already there and waiting for them, so George stood up to meet her. Vincent hoped it wouldn't take long. George loved to chat, especially with young women, and he promised Scarlett that he would be home to take Tara swimming. "Vincent, meet Brooke Price." He turned in his seat, and everything stopped. Everything around him seemed to grow brighter for one extraordinary moment, and then fade so quickly that he thought he might fall. His world froze as he locked eyes with the potential employee. It was Jasmine. She looked almost exactly the same, except that her black hair was cut short at her shoulders. She smiled at him expectantly, holding out her hand for a handshake as if she didn't know him at all. Somehow, he forced himself to move. He shook her hand, trying not to die of a heart attack. George watched him carefully as he sat down opposite the table. Jasmine took the empty chair next to Vincent and no longer looked in his direction. The worst possible anxiety bubbled up in his stomach. 14 years have passed since they last saw each other. He was afraid that she was out to ruin his life because of how it ended. Part of him wondered why she waited so long. He also wondered how the hell she became an accountant. He remembered that she was a student studying something related to archaeology. Perhaps she was lying then. Vincent tried to remain calm, but he felt his hands clenching into fists. "I can start immediately," he heard her voice, as breathy as he remembered. George wrote down some notes on her resume. "You were highly recommended by Alan. He said you were extremely valuable. On that basis alone, you were hired." He looked at Vincent, studying him. He no doubt noticed its strangeness. George was amazingly good at studying people. "If you have no objections, Vin." He cleared his throat and tried to look at Jasmine, but couldn't even bring himself to turn his head. He thought he might throw up. His life flashed before his eyes. Will she tell Scarlett? "No objections." "Wonderful. Brooke, do you need a few days to think about our proposal?" "No. I'm very happy to accept the offer. Thank you very much." She leaned forward to shake George's hand again. Vincent smelled her perfume and noticed that her hair was just as shiny as he remembered. "I'll accompany you," Vincent said suddenly. He avoided confronting her as they both stood up. The steps of her heels echoed behind him, and with each step he felt his day of reckoning approaching faster. As soon as they reached the elevators, he turned around sharply. She stepped back, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" Jasmine blinked. "What? Did you seriously think that I wouldn't recognize you right away?" You're lucky I didn't kick you out the moment I saw you." She looked around, nervous. He felt a little pleased when he saw that he had caught her off guard. Her only escape from him was the elevator he was blocking, and he certainly wasn't going to give in to her until she explained herself. "You're confusing me with someone else," she whispered, after realizing she couldn't escape. He approached her, trying to threaten her with his proximity. "Oh, no. I know exactly who you are, Jasmine, so stop your damn games." She shook her head and looked at him as if he were crazy. "My name is Brooke," she said slowly. "I just showed your boss my ID, my social security card, my—" "I don't care about that," he shouted. Then he looked around nervously, afraid that someone would come to investigate. He took a deep breath to calm himself and gave her a disdainful look. "Are you trying to confuse me? Do we need to talk again?" The elevator bell rang behind him. He stepped aside and tried to cool his anger as several of his colleagues walked out, casting curious glances in his direction. She approached him and frowned. "Listen, psycho, I don't know who you are or who you think I am, but my name is Brooke Price. Now get out of my way." Vincent's nostrils flared and his blood began to boil under his hot skin. He wanted to be cruel to her. He wanted to hurt her for coming back into his life and bringing the past into the present. "Don't ever come back here. Do you understand me? Get out of my life." Jasmine ran past him and eagerly pressed the elevator buttons. "Crazy idiot," she muttered just before the doors closed. Vincent then realized that he was sweating and out of breath. He felt like he was going to die. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes tightly, praying that he would scare her away forever. Scarlett was sitting at the dinner table when he returned home. She did not smile or say anything to him, and for a moment a terrible fear seized him as to whether Jasmine had reached her. He was preparing various speeches in his head when she shook her head and stood up. "You're late. I had to take Tara to practice. I missed my class. Thank you very much." She disappeared into the kitchen, muttering an entire arsenal of impressive curse words under her breath. "Damn. Sorry. George set up a surprise interview. Then I had to finish a couple of things and—" Scarlett flew back and literally threw his dinner on the table. "Bon appetit, asshole." One of the potatoes rolled off the plate, and their dog Samson rushed to catch it. "Come on, Scarlett." He put his hand on his chest and rubbed it. His heart had been racing ever since he saw Jasmine again. He was terrified that he might have a heart attack or something. "You know I can't refuse what he's asking for right now." "Then I guess this is just too bad for me and my career, right? You're the most selfish jerk I've ever met." She returned to the kitchen. He heard the plate break into a million pieces. "Always about you, Vin. Have you noticed that? Come back here, let's talk about this. Sorry you missed your class, okay?" She burst back in. "Are you sure about this?" "What's that supposed to mean?" Scarlett fell into the chair opposite him and exhaled uncertainly. "Do you doubt that I will return to study?" "God, no. I made one little mistake, Scarlett. I said I was sorry." He massaged his head with both hands and shrugged. "I'm really sorry. How can I fix this?" She rested her elbows on the table and put her head in her hands. "At least a foot massage." A smile flashed across his chest. Scarlett had an explosive temper, but she could calm down as quickly as she got angry. "A foot massage seems like an acceptable atonement. And a back rub, and you have to let me choose what TV show we watch tonight." He smiled and let the weight of the day fade away. He scared Jasmine away once before. If she pursued him again, he would simply tell George about the situation. Perhaps he will understand. There must be a way. "Hello? You just got distracted from me." "Sorry," he sighed. "Long day." "Gee, you look terrible. Are you okay?" His eyes closed and he told himself to remain calm. Part of him wanted to confess to her, to someone. Today was too strange to believe. He couldn't, however. She would never forgive him. And many years ago, he made the choice to remain silent. "I'm fine. Where's Finn?" "Ugh, this boy. With a friend, thank God." "Is he still bugging you about the new iPhone?" You can't even imagine, Scarlett sighed. All day long, he printed out customer reviews and asked me why I didn't want to provide him with a secure phone. He literally said those exact words, asshole. Vincent laughed. It's definitely not from me. Yeah, sure, you're funny. She stood up and pointed at his plate. Do you want me to heat it up? Yes, please. He grabbed her wrist as she reached for the plate and pulled her into his lap. I love you, you know. Her lips trembled. I know. I'm so sorry. You know I would never intentionally set you up like that. I'm crazy about you becoming a nurse trainee. You'll be the best nurse trainee New York has ever seen. She pushed the hair away from his forehead. Only New York? Okay, the whole world. I don't want you to become too self-confident. You may realize that you married a slacker and leave me. She smiled. His smile warmed him from the inside, as if something he never knew he was missing suddenly fell into place in his chest. Something that always made him feel like such a loser whenever they dated. I already know you're a slacker. I choose to ignore it for the sake of the children. Does this mean I'm forgiven for being a complete idiot? Let's assume. She ran her fingers through his hair. It felt so good when she did it. He could feel the tension dissipate again. You don't have to fulfill George's every wish, you know. He might respect you more if you said no sometimes. He slid his hands down her back and kissed her tenderly. She was so silky and sweet. There was such a peace of mind that she gave him that he could not describe. He didn't know what he would do if he lost her. This possibility terrified him. He would do anything to avoid this. She pulled away after some time and muttered in pleasure. I keep you around also because of your kisses, by the way. You don't need to tell me that. I'm pretty confident in my kissing skills. Laughing, she picked up his plate and went to heat it up. Things were peaceful. He could almost forget that his dark secret had come face to face with him that day. Almost. Finn returned home from a friend's after curfew. Scarlett was in his room and asked what his problem was. He's been a little rough lately, probably because of his age. Vincent remembered what he was like growing up. He knocked on the door just as Scarlett was on the verge of breaking down. It's good that you're here, she said with relief. You can talk to your son. He just called me dude. I'm done. She walked down the corridor. It was a jokey, he shouted. Hey, calm down. Don't yell at Mom. She yelled at me first. She's your mom. She can do it. He sat down on Finn's bed and watched as he angrily took books out of his bag. Why are you being so hard on her lately? Finn took a deep breath and sat down next to Vincent. Samson was curled up on the pillow, and Finn automatically rubbed his stomach. She puts pressure on me all the time. You're lucky to have her. My mom never kept an eye on me. That's probably why I was always in trouble. She says I'm being punished. He tried to give Vincent one of his famous puppy dog looks, but they didn't work for him. They only worked for his mother, with whom he, unfortunately, was currently angry. He sank dejectedly when he saw that his father would not yield. Yes, you came home after curfew. You know the rules. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He took it out and saw a message from George. I need to talk to you tomorrow morning. Fear entered his stomach and lingered there. He was sure it had something to do with Jasmine. Dad, are you okay? He put the phone away and forced lightness into his voice. I just forgot to do something at work. Does this mean you won't get a promotion? He snorted. How do you know about this? You talk about it all the time. Finn has regained some of his enthusiasm. Dad, I promise I won't be late again if you get me out of this time. I'll sweep the floors and be nice to Tara for a week. Vincent ran his fingers through Finn's hair and shook his head. Maybe stop being such a jerk and you won't have to ask me to bail you out of the punishments you deserve. Finn sighed and leaned back on the bed. Vincent left him lost in his grievances and found Scarlett in the dining room. She sat in front of a huge textbook and drank a huge glass of wine. She didn't even seem to read the text. She was upset with Finn. His constant displeasure annoyed her, even more than Tara's sometimes harsh irony. He sat down next to her and stole a sip from her glass. He'll grow out of this. Scarlett leaned on him and peered into his eyes. He loved her eyes almost as much as he loved her smile. They were amber and bright. They expressed so many emotions. If he ever wanted to know how Scarlett felt, all he had to do was study her eyes. Now they were telling him that she was tired and sad. Will he grow up? Some days I feel like I gave birth to some sociopath. She winced slightly. Is it terrible that a mother would say that? I don't really think he's a sociopath. It's just, damn it, this kid has just been unbearable lately. He lifted her wrist and kissed it. I think it's because of that friend, Joel, or whatever his name is. Well, whatever it is, he should outgrow it by tomorrow morning. He opened his mouth to answer when Tara burst into the house. Mom, you won't believe it. She ran into the dining room and smiled briefly when she saw her father. Oh, hi, Dad. You won't believe it either. Coach Fisher suddenly left today. No explanation. No one knows why. This is the weirdest thing, just like never before. Scarlett frowned and looked at Vincent. Gone? That's not like her. Any explanation? Tara sank down next to her father. No. So we have a new coach. Coach Price. Cold pricks of terror ran down his spine. What? Coach Price. She's beautiful. I adore her already. Tara looked at Scarlett's textbook with interest. Mom, is this what a heart really looks like from the inside? Ugh. Does she have black hair? Green eyes? Tara looked at him strangely. Yeah. Why? What happened, Vin? Scarlett asked. Do you know her? Nothing. I think I interviewed her at work today. Scarlett looked puzzled. And she moonlights as a swimming coach? I have no idea. Does she know your last name, Tara? Yeah. She came up to us at the end and asked us things. She's really nice. I'm glad you like her, but I hope Coach Fisher is okay. Scarlett pushed his hair away from his face. Are you okay? You're so pale. He made an effort to smile. I'm fine, just tired. I think it's time for me to lie down. In his room, Vincent numbly undressed and crawled under the covers. Jasmine wasn't going to stop until she ended his life. He was sure of it. Now she was going after his children. He tried to get angry, but he couldn't. The unbridled fear that seethed within him was persistent and all-consuming. He was an idiot for thinking that his mistake was behind him. Secrets never go away. They are just waiting to resurface. He couldn't be buried again unless he magically found a way to reason with Jasmine. Scarlett joined him an hour later. He listened to her undress and felt her slide into bed. She hugged him from behind. She was silent for several minutes, pressing her cheek to his hand. She then kissed his skin and whispered, "What's wrong, baby?" "Nothing, I promise." "Lie." He sat down and climbed over it. At the same time, he turned so that she was now sitting on his torso. "I know you inside and out, Vincent. I know when something is eating you. What now? Do you think George changed his mind or something?" He ran his hands down her sides and lightly grazed her breasts with his thumbs, which were hard because of the cold room. He could vaguely make them out through the white t-shirt she was wearing. A small smile flashed across her face, and then she became serious again. She leaned forward until they were nose to nose. "You can't distract me with sex." His eyebrows rose and he shook his head. "I have proof that I have." He pulled Scarlett's strawberry blonde hair out of her ponytail and inhaled as it fell into his face. "I know something is wrong with you. You can tell me." At that moment, she looked so serious, so young, trusting, and beautiful that he could almost feel the words leaving his lips. Then she kissed him, and he let the words sink deep inside his body, trying to get lost in the sensations her lips gave him. He turned her over and plunged into her softness without hesitation or foreplay. At this moment, it was necessary to be inside her. She opened her mouth as if she was going to say something else, but he quickly pulled her pajamas and boxers off. It wasn't slawled or tender sex, despite how she made him feel. He needed a distraction. He needed to think about anything and anyone other than Jasmine Price. And yet, while he was having sex with his wife, Jasmine's face came to mind. He thought of her bright green eyes and the bold yet shy curve of her lips. Vincent slowed down and put her out of his mind. He'd find her tomorrow and put her damn life at risk if he had to. He had worked too hard for this life to allow Jasmine to carry out whatever heinous plot she had in mind. "Vincent," Scarlett breathed. "Come back to me. Where did your head go?" "I'm here," he promised. He kissed her deeply and thrust into her until they both gasped in pleasure. A few minutes later, Scarlett fell asleep, her legs intertwined with his and her arm thrown over his chest. He used to be annoyed when they first met, but now he loved feeling her light weight pressing down on him. He couldn't sleep. Jasmine's face as he drove her away for the last time flashed through his thoughts. He was sure that they would never see each other again. Tomorrow morning he would find her and demand to know what she wanted. He stroked Scarlett's hair and swore that he would find a way to get rid of Jasmine forever. Past her apartment complex was in a bad area of town with poor lighting and loud parties. He waited for her in the parking lot, feeling resentment and anxiety building inside him until his stomach began to hurt. She should have been home at least an hour ago. She assured him that he would not have to wait long. She lied. He was sure that she was doing this on purpose. Every second only increased his anxiety. He turned on the windshield wipers and watched the rain run down the glass in thick streams. It won't be easy. Jasmine, ever since they had one-time sex, decided that they were made for each other. Jasmine also didn't know he was married. He didn't even know her last name. She was a huge error in judgment that he would do everything he could to correct. He couldn't even remember what he and Scarlett were fighting about back then. It was something fleeting and insignificant. He had no intention of leaving Scarlett, even if he knew without a doubt that he did not deserve her. He loved her. Just as the sky darkened into evening, Jasmine's car pulled into the parking lot. She jumped out of the car and headed towards Vincent. The passenger door opened and she showed her head inside. "Come upstairs." "No, thanks. Can we talk here?" Her expression became rigid, and she slipped inside. Her long hair was wet. Even her eyelashes were covered with drops of water. Vincent waited a few minutes and looked at his hands on the steering wheel. For a moment, in a fit of impulse, he wanted to push her out into the rain and speed away. Jasmine reached out and took his right hand, intertwining her fingers with his. He allowed it mainly because he was surprised. "You haven't responded to any of my messages today." "I'm working, Jasmine." A small laugh escaped her, and she brought his hand to her lips. His eyes involuntarily caught the erotic sight of her plump scarlet lips touching his skin. The corners of her mouth trembled a little as she held back a smile. She knew she was affecting him. He took a deep breath. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry, but I can't see you anymore." Those beautiful lips pursed into a thoughtful expression. He looked into her green eyes, so natural and clear. Her eyes made him think of the earth, of lush leaves moistened by soft rain. "You said you wanted me, that night. You said—" "I was drunk," he interrupted, more than a little annoyed. "I was drunk and I would have said anything. Anything." He rubbed his forehead. "Look, you're a wonderful woman. I'm sorry for messing up your life, I really am, but everything I said that night, I didn't mean it. I don't even remember half of it. I'm married." Her mouth fell open and he had to look away. As much as he was annoyed, he didn't want to hurt her. It definitely wasn't fun. The sound of the rain deafened the car, making it even quieter inside. It was ominous. He expected her to scream, hit him, demand, threaten. She didn't do any of this. She just sat there, looking at him, as if waiting for him to say something else that would undo his words. He didn't know what would happen next. His hands fiddled mindlessly in the air just to keep them busy. He could smell her in the damp warmth. He took a sip and glanced at her. Big tears rolled down her cheeks. She sobbed quietly and wiped her eyes. "I'll tell your wife," she suddenly swore. His head shot up. "I'm sorry?" He had visions of her taking away his wife, his pride, his reputation. A hot, blind rage surged through him. He watched her mouth move as she threatened him. "I arranged this meeting. I told you that I had something to tell you, and you didn't even try to listen. You just took over the whole initiative. I wanted to tell you, you were just some random girl I slept with. How can you not understand this? I love my wife. I don't want to leave her. I don't want you. I've told you this 1,000 different ways. Tell me what I need to do to express it to you in a way that you can understand. She fell silent for a minute. Hatred flashed in those beautiful eyes. I'll tell your wife. She needs to know what a disgusting person you are. Disgusting? A cruel, joyless laugh escaped him. Disgusting? Maybe I should remind you how disgusting you were to me? You're disgusting. She looked sickened. I'll tell her. His hand reflexively reached for the back of her head. He grabbed a good chunk of her hair and pulled. Pain spread across her face, and one of her hands reflexively covered it. Get your dirty damn hands off me! Don't mess with me again. Never. Don't mess with my wife. Never. Don't even think about her. What I did to you was a disgusting mistake. I would cut myself off intimate place before letting it happen again. You understand me? Vincent let go of her hair after a sharp tug. She blindly felt the door handle and threw her body out of the car. Go to hell! She shouted before slamming the door. He watched her run towards her entrance, feeling a sense of satisfaction and a vain illusion of security that he would never see her again. The present. George sat at his desk and stared at Vincent as he walked into his office the next morning. Brooke Price said she wasn't interested in the job, he said by way of greeting. Vincent closed the door and tried to look surprised. Really? Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. Stop lying, Vin. He chuckled briefly, then shook his head. Do you know her? He didn't know what to do. George never let him down. He was always understanding and kind to him, but he loved the idea of model families, of men who were real men. Vincent didn't know how he would react when he found out that Vincent cheated on Scarlett. I can see you're thinking a lot. Just tell me. It might still come out, and I'll think better of you if you admit it. A long sigh escaped him. We had an affair, a long time ago. It felt good to say it out loud. George nodded. I thought so. What happened when you saw her off? I told her never to come back. Well, that's disappointing. I thought she'd be a good addition to the company, but I certainly understand your reaction. George walked up to him and put his father's hand on his shoulder. You know I value honesty above all else. Thanks for telling me. He walked around his desk and leafed through several papers. I'll call you when you need me again. He let him go. Vincent still couldn't decide if he really understood what had happened or was just saying it to calm him down. He walked slowly to his office. He met Otto along the way and reflexively grabbed his hand, dragging him to his office to tell him what had happened. Otto listened with his mouth open and eyes wide. When Vincent finished, Otto shook his head and made a low curse sound. And you told George all this? Was it a mistake? Otto licked his lips nervously and shrugged. Who knows? George doesn't think like a normal person. I think I should go back and come clean. Dude, Otto laughed, shaking his head. That would be the worst thing you could do. It's best to leave it as is for now. I can't. I think she's sending me a close-up message. He told Otto about how Miss Price was now Tara's swimming coach. Otto stood up and found a bottle of Vincent's whiskey reserved for special occasions. He poured them both generous glasses and downed his own in one gulp. Vinny, listen to me. Find a way to tell Scarlett and admit what you did. It's the right decision. Do you think she's serious? I think she's just playing. Well, the question is, do you want to play this game? It's been over 10 years and it's showing up at your workplace. Now you're telling me it's interfering with your child's life. I think you should take this very seriously. Vincent ran his hands through his hair. I don't know. I just don't know. Tell Scarlett. He sank into a chair nearby and shook his head. I can't. She'll never understand. Vin, whispered Otto, she'll find out about this one way or another. This is the only way this can end. You need to pull yourself together. It was one stupid night. One stupid, pointless night. Meaningless to you, Otto pointed out. He stood up and left the office, leaving Vincent with his tormented thoughts. Vincent offered to take Tara to swimming class that evening. He wanted to see Coach Price. Tara was rambling on and on about the girl she fought with at school when they walked into the pool. A group of children lined up along the side, joking with each other. The sounds inside were strange and echoing, and just when Vincent thought Coach Price wasn't coming, he heard the laugh he remembered all these years. She stood in the corner with one of the male rescuers. She seemed to be flirting with him, giggling and touching his forearm every 5 seconds. Her laughter spread through the pool, echoing back to his ears with an ominous echo. Her dark hair was pulled back into a loose bun, with sexy strands falling freely around her face. She was wearing a red swimsuit that hugged her body in such a delicious way that Vincent almost forgot about himself. "Ugh, Dad." Vincent looked up from studying Jasmine and looked at his daughter. "What?" "You're staring at her." "Not staring," he said, guiding her toward the locker room with a firm hand on her back. "I'll pick you up later. Have fun." As soon as his daughter disappeared, Vincent snuck up on Jasmine. She noticed him approaching and looked at him with a cold expression. The male rescuer had disappeared, thank God, so Vincent had the opportunity to speak frankly. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Jasmine licked her lips and winked at him. "Excuse me? Do I know you?" "Nice. Very nice, Jasmine." "My name is not Jasmine. I am Sunny. Who are you?" "I'm warning you. This is not funny at all." Vincent looked around and saw that everyone was distracted. He then grabbed Jasmine's hand and enjoyed the brief flicker of fire that flashed in her eyes. "I am tired of this." "I don't know you. Let me go," she warned through clenched teeth. He noticed the male rescuer looking at them, so he let her go. "It's not over yet," he vowed. She just smiled. Vincent turned sharply and walked out to the car. He sat up panting, only noticing the startled beating of his heart in the silence of the car. It was a complete nightmare, and he was afraid he would never wake up. He'll have to go to the police if this continues, but if he does, everything will fall apart. He'll have to tell Scarlett. His marriage will end. His children could be taken from him. George has been taking the situation calmly for now, but if Vincent's personal life starts to fall apart, who knows what might happen. He decided to wait. Jasmine will eventually get what she wants from him. He just had to endure. Scarlett went to pick up Tara when Vincent said he had a headache. He heard the car doors slam shut and how they wished each other good night. Scarlett moved quietly around their bedroom, believing that he was sleeping. She clearly didn't want to bother him, and this fact set his heart on fire and made him feel like the lowest scoundrel. He felt her smooth body slide next to him, and he involuntarily reached out to her. "Vincent? Oh, I thought you were sleeping." He kissed her bare shoulder and tried not to grab her roughly. He wanted her for many reasons, but the main reason for touching her at that moment was comfort. "Vin? What's wrong, honey?" He pressed his hand to her stomach and hooked his leg over it. "I had a bad dream." Scarlett was silent for a minute. Then her arms wrapped around him and she made a soothing noise against his forehead. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No." "How can I help you?" Vincent exhaled slowly. "Stay like this." He pressed his head against her chest and kissed the top of her breasts. She jumped slightly at the sensation. "I can't lose you, Scar." She hesitated for a minute, clearly confused. "You won't lose it. Where did this come from?" "I love you. Promise me you'll never leave me." "Vinny, I love you too. I will never leave you." Tears appeared in his eyes, but they were not from relief. It was a small, dark, vile feeling to make her promise such a thing, knowing that if everything was revealed, she would have every right to spit in his face and abandon him. But he accepted the vow and treasured it, stroked the memory of her words, believed her words. He moved over her and kept kissing her all over until she trembled beneath him. And when he found his own bliss that night, it was in her, wrapped in the physical comfort of her body and the promise that she would never leave him. Past Vin was incredibly hungover when he met Otto the next day. The night before had been redundant, and Vincent had made more than his fair share of mistakes. He woke up in the morning entwined with some girl whose name he could barely remember. Jennifer? Jessica? He didn't want to think about it, so he focused instead on his hangover and how to relieve it. Vincent went to the diner around the corner from the hotel and noticed Otto in the corner. That bastard looked absolutely fresh and energetic. Otto saw him and waved to him with a big smile. "Hey, party animal, how's your head?" "Shut up," Vincent said, sliding into the booth. "I feel like I'm dying." Otto took a large piece of bacon and laughed. "I told you you weren't drinking enough water. You were too busy looking at that girl's cleavage." "No, you were too busy following her friend." The waitress came over and took Vincent's order. When she left, Otto shook his head. "Her friend is wonderful. Her name is Lena, and she's so—" "Dude, I don't give a fuck, okay? She's a bitch, just like her friend." Otto's eyebrows rose. "What are you talking about? They're both good women." Vincent laughed humorlessly and leaned back to study his friend. "Oh? And yours fucked you too?" The waitress chose that exact moment to return, but her expression did not change. Still, Vincent felt like dirt. He was furious with the girl from last night, furious with himself, furious with Otto. He didn't know what to do with all this anger, and it seemed best to attack others. Otto waited until the waitress left, and then leaned across the table, his brown eyes wide as he took Vincent in. "Did you sleep with Jasmine?" Vincent angrily tore the yolk of the egg and nodded. "Yes." "Wow." Otto leaned back in his seat. He was stunned. "What were you even thinking about?" "I clearly wasn't thinking, was I?" Otto watched Vincent quickly eat his breakfast with silent admiration. He didn't seem to know what to say, and Vincent appreciated the silence. "What are you going to do?" Otto asked when they had finished breakfast. Vincent couldn't meet his gaze. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. Are you going to tell Scarlett?" "No," Vincent said flatly. "No way. What she doesn't know won't hurt her." "Are you sure, dude? I think you should—" "I said no." Otto shook his head with a pitiful smile. "What about Jasmine? What's wrong with her? Collateral damage?" "Jasmine? Is that her name? Well, Jasmine is a big girl, and I think she knew what she was getting into." "If you say so," said Otto. From that day on, there was a shift in their friendship. Vincent always told himself that he didn't care, that it didn't bother him, that Otto could be an idiot if he wanted to, but it bothered him. Otto became distant from Vincent. They only saw each other at work. Otto also started dating Lena and spent all his free time with her. Vincent was always jealous of Otto's relationship with Lena. He felt that Otto should have left her because of her affair with Jasmine. Otto disagreed. Nothing was the same between them anymore. The present. A week later, Jasmine was still Tara's swim coach. It seemed that Vincent had no choice but to wait and endure. She will eventually come to her senses and leave, or finally confront him and demand what she wants. One morning, Scarlett started talking about a new girl in one of her classes at breakfast. "She's so sweet and innocent. I adore her." Vincent half listened to her while looking through the newspaper. "Vin, are you listening to me?" He looked up to see Scarlett looking at him, hands on her hips. Yeah. What was I talking about then?" Vincent smiled and put down the newspaper. "Okay, you caught me. Sorry. What were you saying?" She shook her head, but was amused. "I made friends with a new girl in my class, and I want to invite her to dinner tonight, okay?" "Sounds good to me." She kissed the top of his head and then left for the day. Vincent looked out the window and saw that it was raining. He felt disgusting. He even thought about taking a sick day, which he never did, but George wouldn't like it. Despite Jasmine's pursuit, the world still turned. Vincent continued to strive for his position. When he arrived at work, he noticed Lena giving Otto a ride. She saw him through the rain and gave him a furious look. She hated him because he ditched Jasmine all those years ago, and I guess, apparently, She told Otto that he no longer had the right to communicate with him. Then Vincent had a thought. Did Otto suggest something like, "Let's ask Lena why Jasmine is doing this"? He watched the couple say goodbye to each other with growing concern. He then walked over to Lena's car. She seemed to be waiting for him. "Hi, Lena. How are you?" Lena played with her blonde hair, looking at her reflection. "Save it for me, Vincent. What do you need? Are you, still in contact with Jasmine?" Lena looked at him. "For what?" Vincent tried to clear the rain from his face. "She's following me." "Haunting you, huh?" He rolled his eyes and told himself that he wouldn't get anywhere if he started yelling at her. "Can you please tell her that I need to know what she wants if I'm going to fix the situation?" Lena turned to him, and a strange smile spread across her face. "Oh, yeah? Make things better?" "Yes. You need to tell her to stop these childish games and face me like an adult." "And how do you propose to make things better for her?" She was still looking at him with that weird smile, and it made him feel uncomfortable. "This is between Jasmine and me. Just promise you'll tell her, okay?" Then Lena laughed. "Let's get one thing straight, Vincent. I'm not doing your dirty work. I'm not your middleman. I'm not promising you anything. Move away before I run over your feet." He stepped back, more out of surprise than anything else, and watched her dash out of the parking lot. Hot, uncontrollable, violent rage boiled inside him. He rushed upstairs and went directly to Otto's office. He burst in without knocking and ran up to his old friend. "You have to tell Lena to do what I said." Otto must have been in the middle of a call, but he calmly hung up and assessed Vincent from head to toe. "I'm sorry? You heard me. I'm sick of all this. Enough is enough. Lena is her friend. She should be able to tell that bitch to stop." "Vin, you need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. Do you hear me? I want this bullshit to stop. Now. Your damn friend is her friend. Help me with this." The door to the office opened. Both men turned to see George looking at them. "Is everything okay here? I heard screaming." Shame crept into Vincent's guts. He tried to force a smile, but from the look on George's face, he could tell he couldn't do it. "We're okay, George," Otto said quietly. George looked at them one more time, and then left, closing the door behind him. "Remember," Otto said quietly, viciously, "neither Lena nor I want to get caught up in your bullshit. Can you hear me? Jasmine is trying to ruin my life. No, you're doing it just fine on your own. Now get out of my office." The rest of the day passed in a blur. George barely spoke to Vincent, spending more time in Otto's office. Vincent could hear them laughing together and had to resist the urge to rush in and beat Otto up. It was all incredibly annoying, and Vincent felt that familiar tingle of envy running up his spine. He returned home with a headache and a vague feeling that he had done something much worse than he could have imagined. It seemed to him that everything he had achieved just a week ago was slipping away from him faster than he could keep up. He didn't want to think about it too much. Another car was parked in front of the house when he arrived, which was unusual. Perhaps one of the children had a visitor. This worsened Vincent's mood even more. He just wanted to have dinner and go to bed. He opened the door and smelled the delicious smell of his wife's food, and he heard laughter coming from the kitchen. "Is that you, dear?" Vincent put down his briefcase and sighed. "Yes." "Come into the kitchen. Meet Maddie." Then he remembered that Scarlett had invited a friend to dinner. He was on the verge of losing his temper completely, but he controlled himself. He entered the kitchen and kissed his wife on the cheek. Then he looked at the woman sitting at their dinner table and almost fainted. Jasmine. Here, Jasmine. In his house, Jasmine, wrapping his arm around his wife. Both women shared a private smile, and then Scarlett looked at him. "This is Maddie. She started a little later, but she's so smart it doesn't matter." Jasmine nudged Scarlett gently and met Vincent's gaze. "Your wife is smart." The women talked to each other a little more, but Vincent couldn't hear over the din in his ears. Scarlett poured red wine for everyone, and then announced that dinner was ready. The kids were staying with friends for the night, so it was just the three of them. Vincent sat, harboring all sorts of threats in his head. He imagined clawing her eyes out, strangling her to death, all kinds of violence. Scarlett and Jasmine laughed at each other a lot. It quickly became annoying and added to his already massive headache. When Scarlett went to the kitchen for dessert, he followed her. "Your friend doesn't look like Coach Price?" he asked. Scarlett shrugged as she scooped ice cream onto the apple pie. "Never seen her, so I don't know. Why are you so rude tonight?" "I'm not being rude, Scar. I have a headache." "Okay, whatever you say. I'm not going to argue with you, but you've been looking at Maddie since you came home." "Ha, Maddie." She put down the ice cream and bowed her head, studying it. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." He sighed. The wine had an effect on him and loosened his tongue. "I just have a headache, like I said. I think I need to lie down." Scarlett looked at him carefully. He tried to act normal as he said goodnight to Maddie and walked up the stairs, but he knew he was shaking. He heard their laughter for hours after, until he heard the blissful sounds of them saying goodbye and Jasmine's car driving away. Scarlett went upstairs and entered the bedroom, looking at him angrily. "What's your problem? I'm entertaining all your friends. I want to invite someone out for one night and you're losing your mind?" "Sorry, I just feel bad." "Oh, that's complete nonsense." She took off her clothes. "Oh, by the way, I told Maddie that she can stay here until her landlord fixes the hot water problem." He jumped up in bed. "What?" She gave him an irritated look. "Is this going to be a problem? Come on, Vinny." He started laughing hysterically. Tears rolled down his face. She was winning. Jasmine was winning her stupid little game. He was starting to lose his mind. There is no way that he can stand her being under his roof, close to his wife. Scarlett sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Vincent with concern. "Vincent, what's going on?" "My life is over," he said between laughs. "Finished." She put her hand on his shoulder and shook him. "Vincent, what the hell is going on?" The laughter turned to sobs. Scarlett became more and more frightened. He hugged her tighter because he knew he might never be able to do that again. Tears dripped from his eyes onto his body, onto her body. He looked at his wife's face one last time before opening his mouth. "Remember, you promised," he began in a weak voice. And then he told her everything. Somehow he was able to sleep. When he woke up the next morning, he was sitting on the couch and looking around. He could hear Finn talking to someone, but Scarlett was nowhere to be seen. She vomited most of the night. She told him he was a monster. She said she hated him. She vowed to destroy him. He deserved it all, but Scarlett couldn't ruin him. Jasmine has already done this. Vincent saw Finn roughly walking up the stairs, followed by the sound of several heavy objects hitting the floor. He stood up and saw the luggage. "What is this?" Finn didn't answer. He didn't even look at his father. Scarlett must have told him. "Where is your mother?" Finn's gaze rose. There was such hatred burning in his eyes. "Mom's getting ready. We're all getting ready." Vincent walked by him and up the stairs. He entered the bedroom and saw Scarlett crying while packing her things. When she saw him, a cruel smile appeared on her face. "Come to have a look." "Scarlett, honey, I'm sorry." "Leave me alone. I don't need your apology. It's a decade too late." Vincent watched helplessly as his wife and son gathered everything they needed. Tara eventually emerged from her room, her eyes red and puffy. She looked at her father accusingly but said nothing. Vincent couldn't take it anymore and went downstairs. He had begged for Scarlett's forgiveness the night before. He told her how much he loved her, how much he regretted the stupid mistake that he could never correct. She didn't listen to him, and he couldn't blame her for that. When everyone finished getting ready, they went downstairs. Finn hugged his mother. Vincent tried again. "Scarlett, it's not safe. She's crazy." Scarlett looked him over. "No, I'm not safe from you. I had no idea I was married to a sociopath. You're dangerous and selfish." She put the leash on Samson and gathered the children around her. "My lawyer will contact you." Vincent arrived at work late the next morning. He decided that George wouldn't mind, considering that this was unusual for him. But he also didn't really care whether George objected. All his energy was exhausted. All he could think about was Scarlett's eyes and the broken hearts and angry looks of his children. As he walked upstairs, one of the secretaries looked at him with wide eyes. "You look terrible." "Thank you. Any messages for me?" She just shook her head. When Vincent entered the office, he saw everyone gathered around George. He moved closer and heard George speaking in the middle of his speech. "And I'm an absolute control freak. There comes a time when you have to let go, and I make sure I leave it all in the hands of a person who will never make me worry or doubt my decision. This man is a perfect example of morals and work ethic, which I want everyone in this company to have. That's why I'm pleased to announce that your new CEO is Otto Miller." Everyone applauded, and George passed out small glasses of champagne. He noticed Vincent a few minutes later, and the smile on his face froze. Then his expression changed to something Vincent couldn't describe. He patted Otto on the back and demanded a speech. Otto laughed and looked at the crowd. He noticed Vincent too, but didn't seem surprised that he was standing there. He also didn't seem embarrassed or upset about anything. It was as if he had always expected this to happen. Vincent felt more betrayed than ever. "I'm honored that George thought I was the right choice for this job. I know how important it is to him, and it's just as important to me." He raised his glass. "Thank you." Everyone applauded and knocked glasses. No one seemed to notice Vincent standing there, but even if they did, they didn't seem to say Vincent was completely stunned. The words didn't come. He could barely move. When Vincent saw George heading to his office, he followed him. He demanded some kind of explanation. He gave years of his life to this company. How could all this come to nothing? It almost seemed like George expected Vincent to follow him inside. He left the door open, and when he raised his head from his desk, his grim expression did not change. Vincent closed the door behind him. "Why?" "You've been completely unbalanced for the past 2 weeks. I had to choose an option that would give me confidence. Otto has been doing great work for a long time." "But not me?" George looked at his folded hands. "Otto has no skeletons in his closet. He also does his job with such passion and attention to detail that you never had. You wanted to be thanked and praised for every little thing you do here. I'm not sure that ever thanked Otto for a job well done, and it never mattered." "You promised," Vincent said, cringing at the desperate tone in his voice. "So what? We all make promises sometimes that we can't keep. You, of all people, should understand that. So I'm being punished and not getting this position because of a mistake in my personal life?" George shuffled through the papers on his desk and seemed content with the conversation. "If you think that's it, you haven't been paying attention." Vincent felt hot, angry, hurt. He grabbed George's large crystal paperweight and threw it against the wall. Thousands of small crystals exploded and scattered across the floor. George calmly took his phone and asked for security. Vincent threw his head back and laughed. "What, George? Can't you handle me on your own?" Security arrived quickly and pulled Vincent out, ignoring his blows and curses. He saw Otto smiling at him on the way out and flushed. He almost broke free from the guard's hands, wanting to tear the smug smile off Otto's face. "It's not over yet," he shouted to Otto. But from Otto's serene look, Vincent feared that this was truly the end. The house was empty. No wife, no children, no dog, no work. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and collapsed on the sofa. He really wished that Jasmine would show up so he could congratulate her on her ruthless and efficient job of ruining his life. It was actually impressive how she was able to piss him off and ruin everything just by showing up again. He ended up doing her job for her. The psychological approach was a nice touch, he decided. He heard the front door open. He wondered for a moment if he wanted his children or even Scarlett to see him in this state, but he didn't have the energy to move. He laid his head on the back of the sofa and closed his eyes, hoping that he would faint. Bad moment? His eyes slowly opened to see Jasmine in a red dress. Her perfect cleavage was on full display. Her magnificent hair was loose and fell over her shoulders. "I never had a chance, did I?" he asked. "You got the same chance that Jasmine gave." He chuckled and rubbed his eyes. "Are you still pretending to be someone else?" She smiled and moved closer, so that each of her knees was pressed against the couch on either side of him. She lowered herself onto him, and despite everything, he felt himself getting aroused. She must have noticed it too, because her eyes lit up with malicious satisfaction. Her long, shiny black hair lay on his chest. He could smell her perfume. "Get off me." "Why? Don't you like feeling like the pig you are?" He tried to push her away, but it was ineffective. She took a sip from his whiskey glass. He watched, fascinated, as her throat worked, swallowing him. "I hope I'm not interfering with anything," he heard someone say. He looked over Jasmine's shoulder, and there was Jasmine. Vincent shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. The whiskey must have affected him faster than he thought. "No," Jasmine said on his lap. "Join us." She sat down next to them with a thin smile. She ran her hand over Vincent's chest. "What's happening?" Vincent asked with a catch in his voice. He was scared. Another Jasmine appeared. "That's the question. I'm sure you're very curious." He shook his head forcefully. "I'm going crazy," he whispered. Jasmine laughed from above. "Maybe a little bit." Then she jumped off him. The three Jasmines stood together and looked at him. He drank the last of his whiskey and cowged. "I'm Brouquet," said the one on the left. "Sonny," said the middle one, the one who seduced Vincent, with a dirty smile. "And I'm Madier." Vincent looked at the trio and felt sick. He didn't know what to say, so he was silent. "So you see, Vincent, we were all telling the truth when we said we weren't Jasmine," Sonny breathed. She ran her hand down her body, her lips curling upward as she saw his ease following her. "Jasmine was our sister," Brooke said. "You're so soulless that you can't understand the bond that sisters feel, or quadruplets. We were broken when you broke Jasmine." "Do you want to know what happened to her after you left her?" Maddie asked. Her eyes were sad and full of tears. "She was pregnant with your child. She tried to tell you that the last time you saw each other. She wanted to keep the child, even knowing what a useless, cruel person you are, so she carried your child to term. There were complications, and the baby and Jasmine died in the delivery room." The three sisters wiped tears from their eyes and grabbed their hands. They held hands. Vincent looked at them, completely shocked. He couldn't feel anything. He couldn't even believe what was in front of him. "We made a promise to her and to ourselves," Brooke continued. "We'll make you pay. We'll wait until you're completely oblivious, surrounded by a happy little bubble, and we'll burst it." Can you imagine how crushed we were? Sonny's smile disappeared. All that was left was anger and hatred. "I think you can't. You don't have feelings. You can't imagine it. That's why we're here. That's why we did this. You don't deserve a moment of happiness. You need to know what it is." "Your wife knows the whole story now," Maddie said. "We all went to her and told her. I'm really sorry that I hurt her feelings, but she needed to know the full extent of the filth she married. We wanted to tell her years ago, but it was important to do it this way." "Tell me," Sonny intervened, "did you ever think about Jasmine after you left her?" Vincent shook his head. "I tried not to think. I was married." Sonny put her hand on his face and lifted him up so his gaze met hers. "That's not the answer, Vincent." "No, I didn't think about her." Maddie smiled. "Well, you think about her now, don't you? You can never get her out of your head." Vincent was dizzy. He hugged the couch as the room spun around him, and all he could see was Jasmine's face. "Goodbye, Vincent." Brooke sighed. "We really enjoyed our time with you, although we're sure you can't say the same." The sisters laughed. Vincent closed his eyes and tried to breathe through his nose. It was a nightmare. This couldn't be real. He was just going crazy. This couldn't be real. He opened his eyes, and there was Jasmine in the green dress the night they had sex. Her eyes were wide open and omniscient. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I didn't know. If I had known." This couldn't be real. "Jasmine, I'm so sorry," Vincent cried. "I'm so sorry." This couldn't be real. "Why, Jasmine," Vincent lamented, "I didn't mean to hurt you." This was reality. The sisters walked out into the night and ran to a waiting car. Otto drove off as soon as the girls jumped into the back seat. It was fast. Lena turned around in the front seat, her eyes bright. How it was? The sisters clasped each other's hands. Indescribable, one whispered. Everything is just as I wanted, sighed another. It was worth it, the latter confirmed. The women looked at each other with wet eyes and victorious smiles. It's all over. They won. No one will ever forget Jasmine. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.